Chapter 1741. After Gu Xingyin's words, everyone basically made their choice. Except for Qin Qingqing, everyone expressed that it was not easy to come here, so how could they leave without any gains? Gu Xingyin looked at Qin Qingqing, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Qingqing, why don't you go out alone and wait for us outside?" Qin Qingqing looked at the gloomy environment around her, almost holding back her tears, and shook her head. "No, I'll go with you." If she went with the others, at least there would be someone to take care of her. But if she went out alone, who knew what would happen? Qin Qingqing understood very well. Thus, the matter was settled. Looking at the surrounding environment, Gu Shengyin said, "It's dark now, we're not in a hurry to explore. Let's find a place to rest for the night, and wait until dawn tomorrow to slowly explore. What do you think?" Although she said this, she knew better than anyone else in her heart. When dawn came tomorrow, the peace here would no longer be there. The real Azura purgatory would officially begin. The rest of the people looked at the gloomy environment, and in addition, they had been in the car for half a day and walked for so long, so they all nodded. Gu Shengyin looked around, found a relatively spacious and clean place by the wall, and sat there. The few of them lit up their flashlights and took out some food from their bags. Gu Shengyin also warned them very seriously. "In this place, you have to be vigilant at all times, especially your bags with food. You must be careful, and you can't make any mistakes." The few of them nodded. After eating, Gu Shengyin divided the 6 of them into groups of 2, and took turns to keep watch at night. "We don't know what's in this castle, it's better to have someone keep watch at night. I'll keep watch first, you guys go and rest." Gu Shengyin took out the dagger at her waist and said. Zhang Chao also volunteered, "I'll go with you?" The white-collar man looked and said, "Then in 3 hours, you guys wake me and Wan up, we'll keep watch for the second round together." Qin Gu and Qin Qingqing were in the 3rd round. Everyone nodded. Gu Shengyin and Zhang Chao sat back to back while the others closed their eyes and fell asleep. Time passed slowly. Gu Shengyin could hear the long breathing of the person behind her. Apparently, they had fallen asleep after a long day of tiredness and tension. Her eyes were wide open and she was not sleepy at all. She was afraid that something would suddenly jump out from beside her. He really got what he wanted. Gu Shengyin glanced around and saw a young man of about 12 or 13 years of age suddenly appear from the opposite corner. The young man looked very delicate and cute, but his face was abnormally pale, reflecting a dim light in the darkness. He stood there with his back straight, his eyes flashing with a faint green light as he looked over. He was wearing very shabby clothes. The style was completely different from what he was wearing now. It looked like the formal attire of the nobles in ancient Western times. Gu Shengyin looked at the little brat calmly. Zhang Chao seemed to have sensed something. He shivered, rubbed his hands, and said to Gu Shengyin, "Lang Shi, do you feel that it's especially cold?" Gu Shengyin said in her heart, "A ghost is staring at you without blinking, of course you would feel cold." She could only comfort Zhang Chao, "Maybe the temperature difference at night is bigger." Zhang Chao nodded. After a while he came over and said in a low voice, "Lang Shi, I still feel that this place is a bit strange." Gu Shengyin did not pay attention to him, because she saw that the little brat was floating towards her. 7 Night. Gao Lengji, go take a nap, I'll see you later. Chapter 1742. Gu Shengyin watched as the little ghost got closer and closer to her. His legs were clearly leaning against the ground, but when he moved, she didn't see him move at all. His whole body was slowly moving towards the 2 of them. With this and the surrounding environment, Gu Shengyin was sure that no horror movie could produce such an effect. While she was nervous, Zhang Chao was still talking. As if to ease the tense atmosphere, Zhang Chao said half-jokingly, "Do you think we'll really meet a malicious spirit that has lived for hundreds or thousands of years in here?" Gu Shengyin. She wanted to say, "Yes, we've already met it." While Zhang Chao was talking, the little ghost had already arrived beside the 2 of them. At first, he stood in front of Gu Shengyin and then bent down. Gu Shengyin almost lost her breath. Because the little ghost bent down and stared straight at Gu Shengyin's face with his pale green eyes. Gu Shengyin didn't need to look down to see that the little ghost had already grown bronze-silver cufflinks. System. System. Gu Shengyin's voice was trembling in her consciousness. At this time, the only thing she could trust and confide in was the system that accompanied her. I'm scared to death, it's too scary. Gu Shengyin's voice was even crying. The system calmly comforted her. Don't be afraid, host. He won't hurt you. You just need to pretend that you can't see him. On the surface, Gu Shengyin didn't seem to be afraid at all. She sat quietly with a tense expression, as if she was thinking about something. Zhang Chao, who was sitting back to back with her, felt a little strange. Why did he feel that Lang She's body was so stiff? He asked casually. Gu Shengyin quickly turned her head with this excuse and heaved a sigh of relief. She made up an excuse and said that she felt a little cold at night. Fortunately, the little brat also felt a little bored. He got up and left Gu Shengyin's side. Gu Shengyin felt that her back was drenched in cold sweat. Then, Zhang Chao was in trouble. He suddenly shuddered and complained to Gu Shengyin, "This place is really cold. I always feel like I'm sitting in the cold wind of winter." Gu Shengyin did not dare to look back at him. That was because she saw that the kid didn't leave. Instead, he went to Zhang Chao's side. He seemed to be very interested in the camera hanging on Zhang Chao's chest. He was playing with the camera with his pale hands with long black nails. The little ghost's posture made it seem as if his entire body had shrunk into Zhang Chao's embrace. Of course he would feel cold. Gu Shengyin finally couldn't help but look back at Zhang Chao, who didn't know anything. He was just frowning because of the cold. She sighed in her heart. Sure enough, the ignorant were fearless. If Zhang Chao could see it, he would probably collapse if he saw a little brat in his arms. "What's the matter?" Zhang Chao asked in confusion. Gu Shengyin replied casually, "Nothing." Zhang Chao asked, "Then why did you suddenly push me?" Gu Shengyin. She suddenly fell silent. Zhang Chao seemed to realize something and suddenly fell silent. After a long time, Gu Shengyin felt that the sleeve of her coat was gently pulled. Zhang Chao's trembling voice came, "Lang She, just now, you didn't push me, right?" Chapter 1743. Gu Shengyin turned around and looked at the little ghost who was standing beside them in boredom. She saw a faint handprint on Zhang Chao's shoulder. It was obvious that it wasn't her own. She tried her best to calm down and comfort Zhang Chao. "Don't scare yourself. It's not like that." Zhang Chao didn't think that the push just now was an illusion. But when he saw that even a woman like Lang She was so calm, he felt that his reaction was really embarrassing. He could only suppress that trace of fear and quietly wait for time to pass. The little ghost stayed here for a while and then left. But this wasn't the end of the matter. In the dark and fearful atmosphere, time always passed extra slowly. Zhang Chao raised his wrist to look at the time almost every few minutes. Then, he realized with despair that only a few minutes had passed since the last time he looked at the time. Gu Shengyin, who was looking at every corner of the hall, suddenly noticed that Zhang Chao's breathing became heavy. Something happened. Gu Shengyin turned around and hurriedly asked, "Zhang Chao, what's wrong?" This time, Zhang Chao's voice was really trembling. He pointed at the empty floor in front of him. Not only his throat, but his whole body was trembling. "Blood. The floor is full of blood, and it's rushing towards us." Gu Shengyin looked carefully. There was nothing on the floor. But when she looked up, she did see a woman wearing a pointed hat on the wall on the ceiling, smiling at them. But that smile, no matter how you looked at it, it was so strange that it made people's hair stand on end. Gu Shengyin. This group of ghosts really didn't give people peace at all. Zhang Chao couldn't help but take a few steps back, as if he was avoiding something. He just happened to trip Qing Gu, who was sleeping behind him. Qing Gu was groggily woken up and scolded impatiently. Then, he seemed to realize where he was. He hurriedly opened his eyes and picked up the self-defense weapon that he had been sleeping with. Then, he pulled Zhang Chao and asked, "What's wrong?" "What happened?" Zhang Chao was pulled awake by him. He pointed at the floor. There's so much blood. Qinggu was shocked. He looked in the direction that Zhang Chao was pointing at and shone his flashlight over there. It was completely blank. Where was the blood? Zhang Chao also glanced at it. The blood was really gone. Qinggu probably knew that his companion was probably nervous, so he didn't scold him. He only said, "You must be too nervous, causing your body to hallucinate. There's nothing. Don't be afraid." As he spoke, he looked at the time and took the initiative to ask Zhang Chao to switch places so that Zhang Chao could rest for a while. Looking at Zhang Chao's current condition, it was not suitable for him to continue keeping watch. Zhang Chao didn't refuse. After Zhang Chao lay down, it became Gu Shengyin and Qinggu sitting together. Qinggu suddenly said, "I'm very curious. Leng Shi, I've been in the ghost castle for so long, but I've never seen you scared." Gu Shengyin thought, "That's because I'm afraid in my heart, and I can't show it on my face." But she couldn't say that out loud. Under such circumstances, she absolutely could not say anything that would weaken the morale of the team. Gu Shengyin said calmly, "Scared? At any time, fear is the most useless thing." Qinggu looked at Gu Shengyin with a strange expression, as if he didn't expect a woman to say something like that. Chapter 1744. Nothing much happened in the following period of time. Gu Shengyin successfully changed shifts with the white-collar couple. She silently closed her eyes and lay on the floor. This was the last night of peace. In the future, no one would dare to sleep even if there was time for them to sleep. In fact, this peaceful was only relative. However, Gu Shengyin was sure that she would not be in any danger, so she reluctantly fell asleep. Perhaps it was because the rest of the people had better luck, but after that, there were no more strange occurrences. The next morning, Gu Shengyin was the first one to wake up from his sleep. She opened her eyes and sat up. Qin Qingqing and Zhang Chao were sitting back to back. Qin Qingqing had already fallen asleep with her head down, while Zhang Chao had a cigarette in his mouth. Obviously, he was not sleepy at all. This was the first time Gu Shengyin saw the whole picture of the castle. It was very big. He didn't feel it when he came here at night, but now, just the hall on the first floor was already a few hundred square meters. Inside, there were cobwebs, dust, and broken furniture, but he could still vaguely see the splendor of the past. Gu Shengyin looked to both sides. There were a few open windows high up on the wall. From afar, he could still see the gray sky outside through the windows. Gu Shengyin called Zhang Chao and woke the others up. It was the first time that everyone saw the castle in the daytime. Maybe it was because of the light, but the castle only revealed a heavy smell of decay. It was not as scary as in the dark. Qin Qingqing threw the fear of last night to the back of her mind. She said excitedly, "This castle is so big. It will probably take us a day or two to walk around." Zhang Chao picked up his camera and could not wait to take a few photos. He looked at the photos in the camera and was very satisfied with the results. The horror novelist Qinggu was also very excited. Obviously, he had found some good material. Gu Shengyin looked at the aristocratic family on her watch and said, "Everyone, eat something first. After that, we will start." It was 5:40 in the morning. Everyone brought their own food, so they chatted and ate at the same time. When everyone was full, Gu Shengyin looked at the time again. 6:00 sharp. She took a deep breath and said, "All of you, stand beside me." Everyone was confused. However, Zhang Chao and Qinggu both subconsciously stood beside Gu Shengyin. When the rest of the people saw this, they also followed suit and squeezed together. In the next moment, the world in their eyes changed. Those dirty, old, and rotten things seemed to have gone back in time in an instant. It was like an exquisite magic. Everyone watched the entire castle as if it had gone back hundreds of years and returned to her most beautiful and dazzling moment in an instant. The floor became spotless, and the murals on the ceiling became colorful again. On the dining table not far from everyone, there was a pure white tablecloth without a trace of dirt. On it, there were even a few newly bloomed roses in a crystal vase. All of this subverted everyone's imagination. What appeared in front of everyone was a luxurious castle comparable to a palace. No one had seen this kind of majesty, luxury, and splendor before. However, at this moment, no one expressed any amazement at this. Because this was too abnormal. Today's 10,000 words are over. Here is a small survey. Do you want to continue reading in such a scary way, or do you want to skip as soon as possible and start the pet warming plot? Leave a comment at the bottom of this chapter. Gao Langji will make appropriate adjustments according to the majority of the requests. Finally, you know what I'm talking about. I'm asking for tickets. Good night. Chapter 1745. Zhang Chao put down his camera. Such a scene that was beyond human control was beyond everyone's imagination. Qing Gu was the first to react. He suddenly shouted, "If something is wrong, it must be a demon. Everyone, get out of here." As he spoke, he took the lead and walked towards the door. However, before he could take 2 steps, the exquisite metal door carved with flowers and wild beasts closed in front of everyone with a bang. It was completely closed. At the same time, bang, bang, 2 more bangs. The windows that were previously open were also tightly closed. All the exits that could be used to leave were sealed. As the doors and windows closed, the entire hall also dimmed. Such a scene made everyone's expression turn ugly. Qing Gu didn't believe it. He walked a few steps to the door and wanted to open it. However, the door seemed to be locked from the outside. He couldn't open it alone. Then, Qing Gu heard a hoarse voice. "Young man, do you need me to lend you a crowbar?" His whole body stiffened. Qing Gu paused and turned his head mechanically. An old woman in a black robe was holding a crowbar in her hand and smiling at him eerily. Qing Gu took a deep breath. Without saying a word, he ran towards the place where everyone was waiting. The rest of the people were also frightened by the old woman who suddenly appeared. Qin Qingqing said with a trembling voice, "You. Which one of you saw clearly where did she come from?" Zhang Chao was so scared that he even dropped the camera in his hand. Qing Gu ran in front of them as fast as he could in his life. He couldn't speak at all and could only gasp in horror. Fortunately, the old woman didn't chase after him. She just stood there with the crowbar in her hand and maintained a smile on her face as she looked at everyone. Gu Shengyin gently closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, everything in her eyes had changed. Those gorgeous and exquisite furnishings were shattered in front of her eyes as if they were a dream. The entire castle was still the same as when she woke up in the morning. No, there was still something different. For example, how was that old woman in a black robe standing in front of the dilapidated door? It was clearly a skeleton with ghostly flames in its eyes. In the hall, the exquisite statue came to life once again. That's right, it was the female ghost that took a picture with Qin Qingqing last night. She walked out of the statue. Gu Shengyin looked at the skeleton at the door and nodded at the female ghost. Then, at the corner of the wall, the youth's figure appeared once again. Gu Shengyin's face turned paler and paler. It was only daybreak. Was there a need for such a big fuss? At this moment, Qin Qingqing tugged at Gu Shengyin's sleeve. "Sister Lungshe, what should we do now?" Before Gu Shengyin could answer her question, the light in front of everyone changed again. The candles on the ceiling and walls were all lit up. Light and fire were supposed to bring hope to everyone, but at this moment, everyone couldn't help but shudder violently. Those flames were all dark blue nether fire. Where exactly are we? Shui Wan's voice already had a hint of sobbing. Gu Shengyin thought to herself, "We're in a ghost castle. A ghost castle worthy of its name." Chapter 1746. At this moment, a sharp voice rang out in everyone's ears. "Distinguished guests, welcome to the Ghost Castle's carnival." Along with the strange voice, 6 delicate plates appeared on the dining table in the hall. Each plate was covered with a lid, so no one could see what was inside. Then, everyone watched as the white statue suddenly moved. She turned into a very beautiful woman in a white dress. Qin Qingqing suddenly screamed. She's the female ghost who took a picture with me last night. The woman seemed to be attracted by Qin Qingqing's voice and looked over at everyone. Then, she slowly moved toward them. That's right, she moved without moving her feet. Qin Qingqing couldn't help but run toward the back. Her movement seemed to have triggered a switch, and everyone ran toward the back. But the stairs were behind the female ghost, so there wasn't much space for them. Soon, they were forced into a corner. Unexpectedly, the female ghost didn't do anything. She only said softly, "Distinguished guests, the ghost castle has prepared a sumptuous breakfast for you." She pointed at the dining table behind her. But who would dare to eat such a strange thing? Zhang Chao said, "We just had breakfast. Can we not eat?" Gu Shengyin, who was standing beside Zhang Chao, could feel his body trembling. "Not eating," the female ghost repeated softly. Then, she raised her head and revealed a sinister smile. As soon as she smiled, her fair face turned pale, her beautiful eyes turned a wretched green, and her sharp teeth were exposed between her lips. "Not eating." Her sinister smile echoed throughout the ghost castle. "If you don't eat, I'll eat you." How big of an impact was it to see a ghost at such a close distance? Qin Qingqing's eyes rolled back and she fainted. Shui Wan's legs went weak, and she fell into her boyfriend's arms. But her boyfriend wasn't much better than her. The two of them fell to the ground together. Then, Shui Wan felt that she seemed to have pressed on something. She subconsciously turned around and saw a child with a pale face looking at her faintly. "Auntie, you're crushing my hand." "Ah." After Qin Qingqing, Shui Wan also fainted. Gu Shengyin noticed that the men around her were trembling. In fact, Gu Shengyin was very impressed that they were still able to maintain their sanity. If she didn't have the skills given by the system, she would have followed in the footsteps of Qin Qingqing and Shui Wan. This was not the time to back down. Therefore, Gu Shengyin looked at the female ghost calmly and said, "Then let's eat breakfast." The female ghost slowly turned around to look at her. She seemed to be very curious about how this human could remain so calm. Only the heavens knew that Gu Shengyin's hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, were gripping the dagger so tightly that his palms were almost bruised. Fortunately, the female ghost didn't say anything after glancing at her. Instead, she turned around to lead the way. Right at this moment, Gu Shengyin gave Zhang Chao a look and glanced at the dagger in his hand. Zhang Chao understood. When the female ghost turned around, he suddenly took a step forward. The dagger in his hand fiercely slashed at the female ghost's body. "Go to hell." Chapter 1747. Ah! The female ghost let out a shrill scream. Everyone could see that Zhang Chao's military knife had cut deeply into the female ghost's flesh, but no blood flowed out. However, the female ghost's scream meant that this thing was still harmful to her. Zhang Chao was delighted. He made up his mind and spun the knife in his hand before pulling it out. The knife was clean, but there was nothing on it. The female ghost seemed to have suffered quite a bit of damage. She turned around and looked at Zhang Chao eerily. Her shrill scream resounded throughout the castle. As if responding to her scream, the entire castle was suddenly filled with countless ghostly wails and howls. For a moment, a chilly wind blew. Everyone's ears were filled with those hair-raising sounds. Gu Shengyin said coldly, "Wake the two of them up. At this time, no one has time to take care of people who have fainted." Just as she was speaking, countless bright and dark shadows suddenly appeared in every corner. Those shadows were all staring at them maliciously. Qin Qingqing had just opened her eyes when she was frightened by the scene in front of her and almost fainted again. However, Gu Shengyin directly supported her. "If you faint, none of us will take care of you. At that time, you will lie on the ground alone and be eaten by those ghosts who have been hungry for hundreds of years. Bit by bit, your flesh and blood will be eaten by those ghosts who have been hungry for hundreds of years. In the end, you will become like them." Qin Qingqing screamed, "Don't say it. Don't say it." Only then did Gu Shengyin stop talking. On the other side, Shuiwan also looked at Gu Shengyin with a frightened face. Such a description was really too scary. The female ghost seemed to be the leader of these wandering ghosts. Her cold voice echoed faintly in the ghost castle. These intruders will be our freshest food. I will offer their blood to the Duke to enjoy. The rest will be our most delicious food. There was a sound of agreement all around. The old woman at the gate said slowly, "But the Duke of this castle hasn't woken up for more than 1,000 years. Is it really okay for us to use his territory?" When they talked about the Duke, even their gloomy faces revealed traces of fear. Clearly, to these ghosts, the mysterious Duke who claimed to be the owner of this castle was an extremely terrifying existence. Unfortunately, these ghosts were using their own methods to communicate. Gu Shengyin and the other adventurers did not hear them at all. At this moment, they were nervous because of the approaching ghosts. Qin Qingqing began to cry. "I must be dreaming, right? This is all fake, right?" Gu Shengyin cruelly exposed her self-deception. "You're wrong. It's all true." She watched as the hole on the female ghost that Zhang Chao had stabbed earlier grew back on its own. It was as if ordinary weapons could cause damage to ghosts, but they were unable to truly kill them. Gu Shengyin was not the only one who saw this scene. Zhang Chao and the others naturally saw it too. It was because of this scene that they were truly in despair. How were they supposed to find a chance to survive in this hellish place? Chapter 1748. At this moment, Gu Shengyin's words gave them hope. "Don't be discouraged. We only need 10 days. We just need to hold on for 10 days. 10 days later, the gate of life will open." Her calm voice sounded in this ghost-infested area, pulling everyone's dispirited hearts back. Qin Qingqing looked at her in confusion. "How do you know?" The dagger in Gu Shengyin's hand flashed, and he cut off the arm of a ghost that was approaching him. The dagger looked small and seemed to be a sharp weapon that could cut iron like mud. Moreover, after the ghost screamed, a thick black fog appeared on its arm, and the wound couldn't heal. Gu Shengyin turned around and smiled at the 5 of them. "You just need to believe in me." In such an environment, in such a situation, if someone told you not to give up, the situation wasn't as bad as you thought. What would you think? The 5 of them didn't know what the others would think. But they chose to believe in her at this moment. They believed in Gu Shengyin and believed that they could win a chance of survival in this ghost purgatory. Even Qin Qingqing gripped the iron rod in her hand tightly. No one was not afraid of death. Who would be willing to give up any chance? If someone had told Qin Qingqing 2 days ago that she would pick up a rod and fight ghosts one day, she would have rolled her eyes. Qin Qingqing would have definitely rolled her eyes and suggested that she go to the hospital. But now, Qin Qingqing only regretted that she didn't take an extra weapon when Gu Shengyin reminded her. A person's potential was really limitless in a desperate situation. At least Gu Shengyin and the other 5 were able to resist this room full of ghosts for a while. However, that was all. No matter how powerful they were just ordinary humans living in modern society. There was no way they could compete with this kind of supernatural ability. Seeing a few hands suddenly reach out from the ground and grab onto Qin Qingqing, Gu Shengyin made a prompt decision. She threw the dagger in her hand towards that direction and quickly took out a triangular talisman from her pocket with her left hand. With a pa sound, she stuck it on the back of her left hand. A ghost tried to sneak up on Gu Shengyin from behind. The moment it came into contact with her body, green smoke began to rise from its hand. She screamed and quickly retreated, disappearing without a trace. "Stay close to me," Gu Shengyin shouted. They hurriedly did as they were told. Then, they realized that once they got close to Gu Shengyin, the ghosts could no longer get close to them. As long as they came into contact with him, they would emit black smoke and scream like normal people who had come into contact with flames. At this moment, everyone looked at Gu Shengyin as if they had seen their savior. Gu Shengyin coughed dryly. Some self-defense items. The few of them stood close together. Gu Shengyin said, "Everyone, sit down." Pay attention, just stay close to me. Just now, everyone's nerves were tense to the extreme. Naturally, they all sat down obediently. After suffering a few losses, those ghosts seemed to have understood that there seemed to be something terrifying on these humans that they could not get close to. Most of the ghosts disappeared into the darkness. Only a few of them, led by the female statue, were still standing not far away, staring at them. Even if they knew that there was no danger, seeing those sinister and terrifying ghosts staring at them, this feeling was not something that ordinary people could bear. Qin Qingqing could not help but squeeze in again. She said in a trembling voice, "What should we do next?" According to the routine, the next move was the big move. First watch. See you at night. Please give me a vote to warm the trembling author. Chapter 1749. The others were silent. To be honest, Qin Qingqing's question was exactly what everyone was thinking about right now, including Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin asked the system to confirm that those ghosts would not be in the mood to eavesdrop on their conversation. Then, she slowly opened her mouth and said, "Let me tell you some information that I know." As soon as she said this, the others looked at her with hope in their eyes. Gu Shengyin said, "This ghost castle is now completely sealed off. In other words, don't think that you can run out of the gate. This place has been sealed off by a barrier. You can't get out." She ignored the despair in the other's eyes and continued, "However, it's not completely impossible. Every 10 days, the door of life and death will change. We will have a chance to get out." She raised her head and glanced at the 5 of them one by one. She said word by word, "So, as long as we can hold on for 10 days, we will have a chance of survival." Following her words, everyone's eyes lit up one after another. However, Qinggu only looked at Gu Shengyin strangely. "You don't look very happy?" Gu Shengyin said, "Because I only told you the good news and didn't tell you the bad news." As soon as she said this, she felt everyone's eyes gather on her face. Gu Shengyin smiled helplessly. "The worst news is..." She raised her left hand. On it was the triangular talisman. "This talisman has a duration of 24 hours. I only have 5 in total." Everyone's expressions changed. This meant that they could only live peacefully for 5 days. In the remaining 5 days, they had to face the ghosts of the entire ancient castle. Thinking of the ghosts that surrounded her just now, Qin Qingqing's body could not help but tremble. "This is impossible. We can't hold on for so long." The others' faces were also filled with despair. Qin Qingqing started crying alone. "I regret it. I regret it. I shouldn't have disobeyed my mother and taken the money from home to come to this place alone. Now that my mother can't contact me and can't find me, she must be worried to death." Gu Shengyin glanced at the ghost that was attracted by Qin Qingqing's crying. She couldn't help frowning and scolding her. "Qin Qingqing, shut up." Among the 6 of them, Qin Qingqing could be said to be the backbone. Therefore, after being scolded like this, Qin Qingqing really did not dare to say anything. Gu Shengyin whispered, "What's the use of crying now? How many times have I told you to turn back and not come here? Did any of you listen?" When she said this, the others thought about it carefully and realized that it was true. Along the way, Lang Shi had indeed told them not to come to the ghost castle several times. Gu Shengyin said faintly, "What we need to do now is to think about how to fight for more time. No one should give up until the last moment." At this moment, Qinggu suddenly looked at Gu Shengyin. "I remember that along the way, you reminded us many times and hinted for us to turn back. Why? Could it be that you knew that we would encounter such a thing this time?" His gaze was fixed on Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin thought to herself, as expected of horror novels. Their imagination was indeed bigger than ordinary people's. Chapter 1750. The rest of the people also looked at Gu Shengyin, wanting to know her answer. They felt that it was very strange. If Gu Shengyin didn't know anything, why would she remind them again and again? If she knew everything, Why would she still come to this ghost castle knowing that she would die? Thinking about it again, before they came here, Gu Shengyin told the driver that she would pick them up in 10 days. They all felt that Gu Shengyin's entire body was covered in a layer of fog. Gu Shengyin knew that there were some things that she definitely had to give an explanation for. She sighed and said, "I remember that when I was replenishing food in that small village, I once told you that I learned some yin-yang profound techniques." Of course, everyone remembered. They still remembered the thunderbolt in broad daylight. Gu Shengyin said half-truthfully, "Before I came here, I had a divination. The divination showed that it was a great calamity." Qin Qingqing listened attentively and complained, "Since you knew it was a great calamity, why didn't you organize us to come here?" Gu Shengyin glanced at her and sneered, "Touch your heart and ask carefully, Qin Qingqing, did I stop you?" Qin Qingqing's expression changed and she didn't say anything else. Qin Gu spoke again, "Since the divination showed that it was a great calamity, why did you still insist on coming?" Gu Shengyin sighed helplessly, "The secrets of heaven can't be revealed. Since I used this matter for divination, it means that I've already gotten involved. Even if I don't want to participate, the heavenly Tao won't tolerate it. Moreover, you all heard the thunderbolt in the clear sky earlier. I can't tell anyone about this matter at all. So I can only try my best to prepare and hope that I can last until 10 days later." After Gu Shengyin said this, she let them leave. After knowing that they wouldn't leave, she asked a few people to prepare weapons and food. All of this was understandable. To put it bluntly, Gu Shengyin wanted to say something. It was fine if they understood because they didn't need to waste their breath. But even if they didn't understand, they still had to understand. Now, in this ancient castle, she, Gu Shengyin, was almost the most powerful force they could rely on. Gu Shengyin looked at Qin Qingqing. "If you have any questions, it's best to ask them all at once. I'll answer you now. After that, I won't have the mood and time to do so." She said this mainly for Qin Qingqing to hear. After all, Gu Shengyin was amazed by the things he did in the original plot. She did not want to be implicated by her when the time came. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, Qin Qingqing's expression changed. She lowered her head and said, "No problem." Gu Shengyin said, "Nothing will happen to us for the time being. Let's think about it and see if we can come up with a solution." Everyone fell silent for a moment. Everyone was racking their brains to think of a solution. But how could it be so easy to think of a solution? Now, what was in front of them was almost equivalent to a dead end. Gu Shengyin thought of countless repulsive ideas, but when she thought about it in her mind, she found that it was completely impossible. There was no solution. She raised her hand and looked at the time. "Everyone, let's eat something first." Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, everyone silently picked up their backpacks. A few people saw their backpacks full of food and thanked Gu Shengyin. If it weren't for her, they would have been carrying 3 or 4 days' worth of food. At that time, even if they were not killed by these ghosts, they would probably starve to death here. Chapter 1751. The few of them ate in silence. At a time like this, not many people had an appetite. In addition, not far away, there were a few malicious ghosts staring at them with their pale green eyes. Under the control of despair and fear, everyone had no appetite at all. However, Gu Shengyin said sternly, "Even if you can't eat, you have to eat. You have to stuff it in. If you don't eat, you can't guarantee that your body has enough strength and energy. When the time comes, even if there's a chance in front of you, you won't have the strength to run out." Then, they realized that the ghosts who had been watching them had moved. Perhaps it was because they saw them eating. The ghosts turned their heads sluggishly. Then, the young noble-looking ghost said something to the female ghost, and the ghosts moved toward the dining table. They still remembered the dining table with snow-white cutlery and 6 exquisite plates on it. It was said that the ghosts had prepared the food for them. However, looking at the current situation, they seemed to be preparing to enjoy it for themselves. They watched as the ghosts slowly removed the covers on the bowls with their hands, picked up the knives and forks, and prepared to eat. Unfortunately, The few people present had excellent eyesight. Therefore, everyone saw clearly what the ghosts were eating. On the plates, there was a bloody human palm. Ugh! Shui Wan was the first to lose control. She turned sideways and vomited all the food that she had forced herself to eat. Her reaction obviously stimulated the others. One after another, except for Gu Shengyin and Zhong Chao, everyone else vomited. Gu Shengyin's heart was actually a little turbulent. However, she didn't expect that this skill of being as steady as Mount Tai could not only affect the body, but also control the physiological reaction. She was able to stand firm in such an environment. As for the other Zhong Chao, he relied on his own ability. Gu Shengyin secretly admired them in her heart. Everyone turned their heads to avoid looking in that direction, but the sounds of chewing and tearing rang clearly in their ears. Qin Qingqing reached out and grabbed her hair. "I'm really going crazy." Actually, it wasn't just her. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. They were all wondering if they would be the ones at the ghosts' table in a few days' time. Gu Shengyin's heart also felt numb. She began to crazily force herself to think of a way. She must think of a way. She absolutely could not sit and wait for death. Time passed bit by bit. The first 24 hours passed. Gu Shengyin signaled everyone with her eyes, but no one moved. They were trying their luck and stalling for time. They prayed in their hearts that the ghosts wouldn't know that their charms had lost their effect. What if they were lucky enough to drag out the 10 days? However, it turned out that even Lady Luck was not on their side. In less than 10 minutes, Qin Qingqing screamed. A pale hand suddenly reached out from the ground and grabbed her calf. Soon after, an equally pale face emerged from the ground, revealing a row of white teeth as it opened its mouth at her. Qin Qingqing was dumbfounded. She didn't even remember to resist. Fortunately, Qin Gu, who was sitting next to her, reacted quickly and hit the ghost's hand with a stick. Perhaps the ghost was in pain, so it shrank back into the ground and disappeared. However, the commotion here had once again attracted the attention of the ghosts. The 7th update. There are 3 more updates before 12 o'clock. See you later. Chapter 1752. Looking at the ghosts who were closing in on them once again, Gu Shengyin could only take out another piece of talisman paper and stick it on her hand. The few of them heaved a sigh of relief once again. But Gu Shengyin's mood didn't relax because of this. This was the 2nd piece of talisman paper. It could still be peaceful for 4 more days. Then what about after 4 days? After 4 days, there were still 5 more days. How were they going to spend the next 5 days? Gu Shengyin started to discuss with the system. Is it possible for you to arrange a certain death mission for me that is completely impossible to complete? The system's white light flashed. Host, this kind of thing is impossible. The system doesn't decide which world to go to and the system doesn't know everything. But the system can tell the host with certainty that any mission can be completed. Gu Shengyin's heart suddenly calmed down. Although the system didn't say anything effective, but at least Gu Shengyin knew that at least, she didn't have no hope of survival. As long as it wasn't an unsolvable hopeless situation, there would definitely be a way. Gu Shengyin said to the other 5 people, I just did a silent divination in my heart. It's not like we have no hope. Everyone's eyes lit up at once. Gu Shengyin said with a calm face, the result I just got is that there is a 9 out of 10 chance of survival. In other words, although this ancient castle is filled with danger, we still have a chance of survival. As long as we can find it, we will definitely be able to get out alive. Qin Qingqing looked suspiciously at Gu Shengyin. Is what you said true? You're really not lying to us? Gu Shengyin glanced at her and said, Then tell me, Qin Qingqing, we've already come to this point, what's the point of me using this kind of thing to lie to you? She really didn't like to deal with people like Qin Qingqing. It was really tiring. Qin Qingqing choked on her words again and could only choke. Even if there is a way, who knows if we can find it or not. 9 out of 10 chance of survival means that the probability of dying is much higher than surviving. This time, Gu Shengyin didn't even need to say anything. Everyone else's expression didn't look good. When they heard Gu Xingyi's words, they had the greatest desire for survival. However, Qin Qingqing kept pouring cold water on them. No matter who it was, who could stand it? Even Shui Wan, who had always been good-tempered, couldn't help but say, "Qingqing, this method was thought of by humans. You have to find your own way out. Could it be that according to what you said, since we don't have any hope, why don't we just sit here and wait for death?" Sit here? Gu Shengyin suddenly had an idea. She suddenly recalled the original plot. In the original plot, the 6 of them didn't have any amulets or gold fingers. But in the end, Qin Qingqing survived. In the beginning, after reading the plot, she thought that those people had all died in the illusion created by the ghosts, and Qin Qingqing had escaped because she had gone crazy. But now that she thought about it, she realized that it wasn't like that. These ghosts would really fight on their own. According to what she had experienced, Qin Qingqing definitely wouldn't be able to survive in this place for 10 days. So, this meant that in the original plot, Qin Qingqing had actually accidentally found the only way out? Gu Shengyin started to recall the original plot bit by bit. To be honest, the description in the original plot was quite gory. But in order to find the result, Gu Shengyin had no choice but to bite the bullet and read on carefully, not missing a single word. Chapter 1753. She ignored the bloody details about how people died. Gu Shengyin finally saw the moment when Qin Qingqing was alone. There were ghosts chasing after her. In a panic, she pushed aside a ghost that was blocking her way and ran upstairs. Behind her, Qin Qingqing went crazy. There was no more detailed description of it. But Gu Shengyin suddenly caught a detail. Upstairs. Could it be that the key to Qin Qingqing's survival was upstairs? Gu Shengyin's heart suddenly jumped. This time, it was not because of fear, but excitement. She suddenly turned her head and said to a person with a drooping head, "I have a guess." Everyone looked at her blankly. Gu Shengyin saw their expressions and sighed. "Cheer up. We are not at the end of our rope yet. Think about it. We are sitting in the castle, eating, and watching the best horror movie in the world. What is there to be dissatisfied with?" Even in such an environment, Gu Shengyin's lame joke still made people laugh. Zhang Chao was the first to laugh out loud. "Lang Shi is right. We are not at the end of our rope yet. What are we afraid of?" Gu Shengyin liked such smart people the most. Zhang Chao asked her at this time, "What guess do you have?" Gu Shengyin didn't want to tell them that upstairs was probably their only hope of survival. After all, it was just a guess. If it was wrong, wouldn't it be even more unbearable if they lost hope when there was hope? She just said in a low voice, "We can't keep sitting here. I want to go to the 2nd floor and see if there is anything." As soon as she said this, everyone looked at the place where the statue of the female ghost was. The place where the statue was located happened to be at the top of the stairs. This also meant that if they wanted to go to the 2nd floor, they had to go through the statue of the female ghost. And everyone looked at the stairs. The castle was too big, and the stairs were very wide and long. At least from their point of view, they could only see that the stairs seemed to be inlaid with gold extending all the way up and then disappeared into the invisible darkness. It was frightening for no reason. Qin Qingqing was the first to cower. Who knows if there's something even scarier on the 2nd floor? Gu Shengyin lightly interrupted her. "Then tell me, what's the difference between meeting a ghost and meeting a group of ghosts? Do you think we'll meet anything other than ghosts on the 2nd floor?" She then looked at the others. Zhang Chao was the first to express his willingness. "Sitting here is a waste of time. Why don't we give it a try?" Several men expressed their willingness to give it a try. Shui Wan was a little scared, but she still nodded. In fact, everyone knew that in their current situation, the most foolish thing to do was to sit there and not move. However, they knew that they wouldn't be in danger as they sat there. However, if they went up to the 2nd floor, no one could predict what would happen next. Opportunity is always accompanied by risk. Gu Shengyin only said this one sentence. Qin Qingqing thought for a while and finally stood up. Gu Shengyin asked everyone to carry their bags. This was something that could not be damaged. She seriously reminded them, I don't know if those ghosts will stop us when we go upstairs. Everyone just needs to remember one thing. Stay close to each other. In this way, those ghosts won't be able to get close to us. No matter what happens, don't be afraid. They can't hurt us. Chapter 1754. Everyone nodded. However, when they were really faced with it, they realized how difficult it was to do it even though they knew it in their hearts. The group of people slowly stood up and leaned against each other. The hand that leaned outside held a weapon. They began to move toward the middle of the living room. As the only humans left in this ghost castle, their movements obviously attracted the attention of countless ghosts. Then, everyone understood what it meant to challenge the limit. As they walked, countless hands appeared on the ground. It was as if you took one more step forward, those hands would climb up and grab your pants, drag your legs, and drag you to hell. Fortunately, Gu Shengyin was walking at the front. Although she felt that her heart was about to stop, on the surface, she was still calm and unruffled, as if she didn't see anything. She unswervingly continued to step forward. Then, those hands that were blocking the way hurriedly retracted as if they had met their natural enemy. In an instant, the entire ghost castle was filled with a chilly wind, and the sound of ghosts crying could be heard. Everyone's body was trembling. In fact, they could not even tell if they were trembling or if their companions were trembling. Of course, the truth was that everyone was trembling. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. Even if she believed in the quality of the system's products, when she saw those things, she was still afraid. They would drag her to hell. This is really too exciting. Zhang Chao's face was stiff, and he squeezed the words out from between his teeth. He could still barely speak, but the others were so nervous that they were tongue-tied. There was only one thought in their minds: never let go, they can't touch me. There was nothing else. Then, they quickly reached the staircase. Gu Shengyin's movements almost imperceptibly paused. That was because the female statue was standing there, looking at them sinisterly. She had already removed that layer of beautiful disguise. On the green and white ghostly face, the pale eyes stared straight at them. She reached out her hand with the same pale green fingernails, and made a grabbing gesture at Gu Shengyin and the others. Qin Qingqing was scared to tears again. Let's not go, okay? Not going, I really don't want to go. As if responding to her words, the female ghost let out a burst of gloomy laughter that echoed in everyone's ears. Gu Shengyin felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead. She was really scared. But he had no choice even if he was afraid. She said sternly, Qin Qingqing, shut up. If you're afraid, you have to clench your teeth. She can't touch you, so what are you afraid of? Tell me, what are you afraid of? If you can walk with your eyes closed, you will. But let me tell you, if you fall behind alone, no one will save you. Qin Qingqing was so scared that she didn't dare to speak. Everyone could feel that she was squeezing in even more. To be honest, everyone was already squeezed very tightly, and this was already very uncomfortable. However, no one objected to this. They even felt that at this time, only by relying on each other tightly could they give themselves a little sense of security. Gu Shengyin's words were not only said to Qin Qingqing, but also to herself. She looked at the female statue ghost not far away in front of her, gritted her teeth, and walked straight towards her. Phew, the 10,000 chapters were finally finished. I won't tell you that when I was writing this, I was sitting alone in a very big room with a window behind me, imagining the plot in my mind. I'm probably already a useless branch, really. I'll only write the male lead tomorrow. Please give me a vote. Please bless me with no nightmares tonight. Good night. Chapter 1755. Bit by bit. She was getting closer and closer. Gu Shengyin had already walked to the side of the female ghost statue. If the female ghost stood still, she would directly bump into her. Gu Shengyin took a deep breath in her heart, and then, without hesitation, she stepped in the direction of the female ghost. The female ghost suddenly opened her mouth. Everyone saw clearly that the female ghost's mouth suddenly enlarged infinitely, as if it had become an endless black hole. It was a real bloody mouth. And if Gu Shangyin took another step forward, the brain hole would directly bump into her mouth. Shui Wan, who was tightly pressed against Gu Shangyin, subconsciously stopped in her tracks. Gu Shangyin's body stopped. She raised her head and looked at the bloody mouth that revealed its sharp teeth. It was very close to her. It was so close that if she moved forward a little bit, she might be doomed eternally. It was such a horrible scene, but Gu Shangyin laughed. She said lightly, "I'm not afraid, what are you afraid of? She can only scare me." Yes, she was sure in her heart that this female ghost couldn't do anything to her. Even in such a situation, she only dared to scare him from behind. If she could really do anything to her, how could she still maintain this ridiculous posture? After saying that, she put some strength in her feet. Her whole body directly bumped into the female ghost. Gu Shangyin didn't feel anything. It was as if she was walking normally, and she didn't even notice that she had bumped into something. But everyone saw clearly that when the female ghost was bumped into by Gu Shangyin, her whole body was like a broken mirror, shattering into countless pieces with a crash, and disappearing like a phantom. Gu Shangyin continued to walk up without hesitation. After Qin Qingqing walked up, she suddenly turned her head. When she turned around, she almost screamed again. At the place where the female statue had shattered, there was another female ghost that looked exactly the same as the one that had shattered. Seeing Qin Qingqing turn around, the female ghost raised her head and gave her a sinister smile. Then, she stretched out her arm. That arm seemed to be able to extend infinitely. Qin Qingqing saw it reach out in front of her and was about to grab her leg in the next moment. Qin Qingqing subconsciously wanted to run up the stairs. If he ran upwards, he would be able to get rid of this female ghost. Just as she was about to run away, she remembered Gu Shangyin's stern words. Qin Qingqing's heart quivered. She suppressed the fear in her heart and closed her eyes tightly. "I can't run. I can't leave everyone. She can't hurt me." Nothing happened. When Qin Qingqing opened her eyes again, she saw that the female ghost statue was still standing in the same place, looking at her with resentment and unwillingness. Qin Qingqing's heart suddenly relaxed. When she looked at these ghosts again, even though she was still afraid, she no longer felt like she had lost her ability to think. It was probably growth after experiencing life and death. At this time, Qin Qingqing suddenly realized that because she had closed her eyes in fear and didn't move her feet, everyone seemed to be standing on the stairs without moving. She turned around and saw that everyone was looking at her. Qin Qingqing was a little embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I'm holding everyone back again." This time, Gu Shangyin, who had always despised her, softened her expression. "It's okay, let's continue." Chapter 1756. On this short flight of stairs, Gu Shangyin was blocked several times. Those ghosts did not seem to want them to go upstairs at all. Although Gu Shangyin was a little nervous, the hope in her heart grew. In her opinion, the more these ghosts behaved like this, the more likely there was something incredible upstairs. Finally, they stepped onto the last step of the second floor. Gu Shangyin heaved a sigh of relief. She looked sideways at the long and old corridor. With just one look, her heart sank. At the end of the corridor, an old lady with a face full of wrinkles was looking at them expressionlessly. This old lady did not have a ghostly aura. She was wearing a long black dress, and her expression was harsh and strict. She looked like an old madam from a wealthy family in ancient dramas. However, she appeared in a place like this, and dressed like this. Even if Gu Shangyin believed that she was not a ghost, she could not do it. The only explanation was that this old lady, who did not have a hint of ghostly aura, was a ghost that was scarier than the ghosts downstairs. This realization made Gu Shangyin shudder. The other people also looked at the old lady with vigilance. The next moment, they were shocked to find that the old lady, who was standing far away at the end of the corridor, had appeared in front of them. Gu Shengyin felt a chill in her heart. Although the ghosts downstairs appeared and disappeared mysteriously, she could still see their movements. However, even with her psychic eye, she could not see the old lady's movements clearly. It was as if she had really teleported here. The only hope now was that the talisman given by the system would be effective on her. Fortunately, the old lady only came to their side, but did not touch them directly. The system said confidently, "Host, please rest assured. The Guanyin soul-subduing talisman produced by the system is of absolute quality. Not to mention a ghost of this level, even a ghost king would not be able to break it." All right. Gu Shengyin sighed in relief. A reprieve was more hopeful than a direct death sentence. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the old lady's complexion was green. It was not the color of a living person's skin. Looking down, he could see spots of yellow liver mortis on the back of her shriveled hand. However, compared to the group of ghosts downstairs, the old lady's appearance was much more normal. Moreover, she didn't seem to have much of an appetite for them. Yes, appetite. Gu Shengyin thought about the way the female statue and the other ghosts looked at them. It was as if they were drooling over delicious food. It was very uncomfortable to look at them. However, this old lady was different. The way she looked at him was not like she was looking at food, but like she was looking at a stranger who had disturbed her. There was only disgust. The old lady stood some distance away from the crowd and actually began to speak. Her voice was like an old tree bark that had been dried up for countless years. When it was swept up by the north wind, it let out a hoarse and painful cry, making people who heard it couldn't help but have goosebumps. "Humans, this is not a place for you to come. Get down." She spoke slowly, but clearly. This old lady seemed to still retain a relatively clear consciousness. However, her words were somewhat unacceptable to the crowd. Get down. Who didn't know that there was a group of malicious ghosts waiting for them downstairs? Going down to die. Chapter 1757. Gu Shengyin said calmly, "It was an accident that we came to this place. We also want to leave this castle very much. Do you have any way to get us out of here?" As soon as she asked, the rest of the people also pricked up their ears. What if they were lucky enough to meet a kind-hearted ghost who didn't like to eat people and sent them out? Then they heard the old woman's cold voice. "Every 10 days, there will be an alternation between the living and the dead in this castle. That is also the only time when living people can come in. Since you are unlucky enough to come here, don't think about getting out before the next alternation between the living and the dead." Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard that. At the same time, they admired Gu Shengyin more and more in their hearts. It was just as she had predicted. They would have to stay in this place for at least 10 days before they could get out. Seeing that the old woman didn't seem to have any intention of being enemies with them, Zhang Chao mustered up his courage and said, "Madam, can we borrow your place and stay for a few days? After 9 days, we will get out." The old woman slowly turned her head to look at Zhang Chao. Everyone was almost in a circle, and Zhang Chao happened to be in the opposite direction of Gu Shengyin. Everyone saw that her body didn't move, but her head seemed to turn in a circle and look straight at Zhang Chao. This strange scene caused Zhang Chao to shiver. It was too creepy. The old woman's voice suddenly became sharp. "No. Living people are not allowed to enter here. You must leave immediately, leave this place." Gu Shengyin said, "There are countless malicious ghosts who want our lives. We can't go down to die." The old woman suddenly laughed strangely, and extremely sharp fingernails suddenly grew out of her hands. Looking at everyone coldly, the old woman's eyes flashed with a strange light. "Do you think that I won't kill you if you stay on the second floor?" Seeing the old woman's appearance, she frowned. This development was not right. If this old woman on the second floor, who was obviously more powerful, also knew how to kill, how did Qin Qingqing survive? Gu Shengyin felt a little confused. It wasn't a good feeling to think that you had found hope, only to have reality give you a cold slap. She forced herself to calm down. There must be something wrong. There must be a way. Gu Shengyin tried to reason with the old woman. We don't mean any harm, and we won't disturb your life. We just want to find a place to stay for a while. Why can't you tolerate us? However, the old woman couldn't listen to him at all. She just coldly told them to scram. Gu Shengyin simply ignored her. She said to her companions behind her, "It seems that my guess is wrong. The second floor doesn't give us any hope." She sounded apologetic. Unexpectedly, this time, Qin Qingqing was the first to comfort her. "It doesn't matter. Not to mention anything else, at least compared to the dancing demons in the hall, this place isn't so unsightly." As soon as she said this, everyone couldn't help but laugh. That was true. On the entire second floor, other than the dark corridor, it seemed that the old woman was the only ghost that existed. Chapter 1758. Gu Shengyin's eyes slowly scanned the entire second floor. They were now at the top of the stairs that led up from the first floor. The stairs stopped here. Where they were only a few mottled walls, and then, there was a corridor that extended endlessly to the other side. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment. If Qin Qingqing in the original plot ran up the stairs that they had walked up, then, as a lunatic with mental problems, the most likely thing she would do was to run forward when she saw the road. There was no road here, so there was only a corridor left. Could it be that there was a secret at the end of the corridor? Gu Shengyin glanced around. The corridor was like a dim passage, and the place where the old woman first appeared was at the end of the corridor. Gu Shengyin said in a low voice, "Are you willing to follow me to the end? Since this is not our destination, let's continue forward." They all expressed that there was no problem. The old woman seemed to have heard their words. She said sharply, "You're not allowed to leave. Get down, get down." However, she could only scream. She tried to attack Gu Shengyin and the others, but every time before she could touch anyone, there would be bursts of black smoke on her hand, accompanied by a burning pain. No one had been able to bring her pain for thousands of years. Seeing the old woman like this, her heart calmed down. "She can't hurt us. We still have enough time. Take it slow. We'll find a way." She slowly walked towards the corridor. The old woman tried to stop them again and again, even if it meant that she would get injured again and again. Moreover, as they walked forward, the doors of the rooms in the corridor opened one by one. One by one, stiff people walked out and blocked their way expressionlessly. Qin Qingqing almost screamed. Could it be that the old woman wasn't the only ghost on the second floor? Gu Shengyin, on the other hand, scanned with her spiritual eye and found that the corridor was empty. These things were all illusions made by the old woman to stop them. "All of you, close your eyes. These are all illusions. Just hold on to me and follow me," she shouted loudly. These illusions were too realistic. She was afraid that those people would take them seriously. Everyone did as they were told. Although they didn't know how Gu Shengyin knew that these were all illusions, they were already used to listening to her. Everyone walked forward slowly. Gu Shengyin looked at this dark and quiet corridor, and there were always all kinds of illusions. For example, as they walked, a chandelier suddenly fell down on their heads, as if in the next moment they would be bleeding. Or perhaps the floor would suddenly collapse, and there would be cold knife tips below. If they fell, their intestines would be pierced through. Without the psychic eye, Gu Shengyin felt that he probably wouldn't have been able to get out of the illusion. She knew a lot about illusions. She knew that as long as one's heart was shaken, the environment would take advantage of it. In such an environment, once they fell into the illusion, this old woman probably had more than 100 ways to take their lives without touching them. Gu Shengyin ignored the old woman's disbelief and resentment. Finally, she walked to the end of the corridor without changing her expression. The moment she stepped into the end, she thought she had walked into heaven. Chapter 1759. It was just the difference between taking a step forward and taking a step back. It was like the difference between heaven and hell. Gu Shengyin stared at the scene in front of her for a long time in a daze. The others had their eyes closed. Now that they felt that Gu Shengyin suddenly stopped moving, they all felt strange and opened their eyes. Then, they couldn't help but open their mouths. What appeared in front of everyone was warm and bright light. A sparkling and translucent crystal staircase appeared under everyone's feet. On every step, the same transparent pattern was engraved, reflecting a beautiful light under the light. On both sides of the staircase, there were fresh flowers with dew, blooming in the most beautiful moment of their lives. The crystal staircase wound up, making it impossible for people to see the scene behind, but it didn't make people feel afraid. It only made people yearn for it. Who knew what kind of scenery would be at the bottom of this exquisite staircase? Qin Qingqing looked at the perfumed lily in a vase not far in front of her and had the urge to cry. Although she had only been here for a short day, she felt as if she was a lifetime away from the normal life she had before. She couldn't help but want to reach out and touch the petals in front of her, but her arm was pulled hard by Zhang Chao. Zhang Chao frowned and looked at her. "Are you crazy? You dare to believe the things in this place?" Qin Qingqing recalled the scene in the hall. She suddenly shuddered and woke up from her trance. Everyone looked at Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin looked carefully for a long time and finally said slowly, "No, these are not illusions." Under everyone's widened eyes, she gave a definite answer. "These are all real." Shui Wan couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand. This was really too shocking. Perhaps the scene in front of them was too shocking. For a moment, everyone didn't know what to do. They could only look at Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin turned her head. She saw that the solemn and gloomy old woman was looking at them with hatred. She was standing in the shadows not far from everyone. The two sides were in two completely different worlds. One step into heaven, one step into hell. "That's not a place you should go. Come out." The old woman called out to them in a hoarse voice. However, she was obviously worried about something and didn't dare to approach him. Gu Shengyin suddenly felt relieved. She thought that she had probably found the reason why Qin Qingqing was still alive. In the original plot, Qin Qingqing probably stumbled into this place by accident. She burst out laughing. This time, it wasn't to pretend to be calm. Instead, it was a genuine smile of relief. She said, "Everyone, let go. I think we're probably safe now." Everyone was overjoyed to hear this. Zhang Chao said hesitantly, "Lang Shi, are you sure?" Gu Shengyin said, "What I know is that those ghosts don't dare to come close to this place. As for above," she pointed at the crystal staircase and said, "I'm not sure what will be there." As she spoke, she was the first to loosen her grip. At first, everyone was very nervous, afraid that something would happen. They all gripped their weapons tightly. After a while, they realized that nothing had happened. Looking at Gu Shengyin, who sat on the stairs with a natural expression and took out a bottle of water to drink, everyone burst into cheers. They were saved. Chapter 1760. Everyone sat on the ground, and the two girls no longer looked lonely as they sat down on the ground. They slowly took out the food in their backpacks. For the first time in a day and night, they finished a meal normally. As Qin Qingqing ate, she suddenly started crying. She was still biting the bread in her mouth. As she ate, she cried, "I never knew that sitting and eating bread like this was such a blissful thing." She really didn't look good like this, but no one laughed at her. Because almost everyone's eyes turned red when they looked at Qin Qingqing. Only Gu Shengyin was still eating slowly with a calm expression. Then, she realized that everyone was looking at her. Gu Shengyin's first reaction was, did something appear behind her again? She didn't look back. She quickly rolled on the ground and left the area she was previously in. Then, she looked up and saw nothing. Gu Shengyin. She looked at everyone. "Why are you looking at me?" The other 5 people were obviously stunned by her actions just now. They were stunned for a while before they realized that Gu Shengyin had misunderstood something. Ha 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 ha. There was a burst of laughter. They felt that they hadn't laughed so happily in a long time. Zhang Chao finally stopped laughing. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes. Lang Shi, don't misunderstand. There are no ghosts here. We just feel that we are really grateful to you along the way. If it weren't for you, we really don't know how many times we would have died. After he said this, the others couldn't help but nod. Qin Qingqing also said, "Thank you so much, Sister Lang Shi. I know that my personality isn't good, but under such circumstances, you didn't abandon me. I'm really grateful." The others also expressed their gratitude. Even Qin Ge, who had always been silent, had a stiff face and thanked Gu Shengyin. After this incident, the estrangement between them seemed to have lessened a lot. Gu Shengyin glanced at the corridor and found that the old woman had disappeared. Most likely, he knew that there was nothing he could do to them, so he left. Qin Qingqing noticed Gu Shengyin's actions and also raised her head to take a look. She suddenly stood up and walked up a few steps, keeping her gaze away from the corridor. It wasn't easy for me to relax. I don't want to see those things again, she complained. Everyone felt that this was the case. Thus, all of them went up a few steps and left the dim corridor behind. At this moment, Qin Qingqing suddenly looked up. She whispered, "I don't know what's on top of it." As soon as she said this, the others also became restless. Then, they all looked at Gu Shengyin. Along the way, they seemed to have gotten used to letting Gu Shengyin be their leader. Gu Shengyin was curious as well. She asked the system, "Do you know what's at the top of the stairs?" The system shook its head very honestly. "I don't know." Gu Shengyin. The system expressed that it was very innocent. The system has no way of knowing things that didn't appear in the plot. Chapter 1761. As soon as Gu Shengyin came back to her senses, she met 5 pairs of inquiring eyes. She thought for a moment and said, "Everyone is very tense today and should be in a rather tired state now. How about this? Let's take a rest first and have a good sleep. When we're well rested, we'll go up and explore. What do you think?" The others also thought that this was a good idea. Gu Shengyin assigned them casually. "Start with me, then Zhang Chao, Qin Qingqing, Qin Ge, and then Shui Wan. You two decide yourselves. Each of you will guard for an hour. Rest well first, then we'll talk about other things." No matter how safe this place looked, they still had to be vigilant. Okay. The crystal steps were very spacious, and each step was more than enough for one person to sleep. Because of the peace of mind, and the heavy shackles in their hearts were removed, everyone fell asleep immediately. Gu Shengyin quietly looked at this almost illusory scene alone and secretly prayed that there would be no more twists and turns. Time passed quickly. After everyone had slept their fill, everyone stood up energetically. Gu Shengyin still took the lead. She held a dagger in her hand and slowly walked forward. Nothing unexpected happened. There would be a turn after every 9 steps. Gu Shengyin counted every turn he took until he reached the 9th turn. Finally, there were no more spiral steps in front of him. They had reached the end. Gu Shengyin clenched the dagger in her hand and said in a low voice, "Everyone, be careful." Everyone expressed that they understood. Then, they slowly made their way to the top. What greeted their eyes was, it was a very big room. The floor of this room was covered with a thick lavender velvet carpet. On the left wall, there was a huge Western-style wall clock. The room was very orderly. The people present might not be able to recognize every piece of furniture and decoration, but they could see the nobility and luxury with their eyes. It could be imagined that the owner of this room should be a person of high status who paid great attention to the quality of life. Qin Qingqing suddenly exclaimed in a small voice. Everyone followed her gaze. It turned out that there was a huge oil painting hanging on the wall on the right, probably above the main chair for receiving guests. Due to the position they occupied after ascending the stairs, they did not see this at first glance. This was a man who could easily take away everyone's breath and gaze. His long black hair was tied up high, revealing a pair of eyes that were even more mysterious and enchanting than the most beautiful amethyst. His facial features were so deep and perfect that they seemed to have been carefully sculpted. The corners of his lips curled up slightly as if he had seen something that made him happy. Continuing to look, the person in the painting was riding on a white horse. In his hand was a longbow inlaid with gems. Obviously, he was hunting. Judging from his joyful expression, he must have hunted a decent prey. Looking at his riding attire, it was obvious that this attire was from at least a few centuries ago. It should have been a painter back then who had faithfully recorded this scene. "What a beautiful person," Qin Qingqing murmured. Her eyes lit up. "Compared to the people in this painting, the few male celebrities I've chased before are simply repulsive." Everyone nodded in deep agreement. Zhang Chao muttered, "Maybe the painter deliberately painted him to look good in order to please this aristocrat?" Today, there was no electricity at Gao Lengji's place for the whole day. The previous 4 chapters were tenaciously persisted by the notebook. This is the 7th chapter. There are still 3 chapters in the evening. "I didn't lie to you, right? The male lead is coming, it's not scary anymore. Hurry up and vote for Gao Lengji, who is a woman of her words. It's the end of the month. Don't waste the monthly votes." Chapter 1762. Qin Qingqing rolled her eyes at him. "I don't believe that a painter from hundreds of years ago has such a good imagination." Gu Shengyin watched the two of them bicker. She silently looked at the scene in the room. This place was actually very abnormal. Not just here. In fact, it should be said that from the beginning of the crystal stairs, everything was very abnormal. There was no doubt that this was an ancient castle that had existed for hundreds or even thousands of years. Moreover, looking at the appearance of the first and second floors, it was impossible for anyone to come here. Then, how did those crystal stairs remain untouched after thousands of years? Where did those lights come from? How could there be lights hundreds of years ago? What was even more ridiculous were those flowers with dew on them. What kind of flowers could not rot after thousands of years? The situation in the room above was the same as on the stairs. The carpet was clean, the chairs and tea sets were not even a trace of dust. The oil paintings seemed to have just been hung up. All of this seemed to have been frozen in time at the most beautiful moment. The problem now was that Gu Shengyin knew that there was a problem everywhere, but she did not feel any danger. She also did not feel anything wrong. Moreover, from this room, except for the stairs below, there was no exit or door. There was only a living room and a small bathroom. There was not even a bedroom. No matter how she looked at it, it was very strange. The others were obviously not fools. However, after Gu Shengyin said it out loud, no one dared to touch anything inside even though they were elated. Gu Shengyin looked around and said, "I can't see through the mystery of this. Everyone, don't touch anything inside. We'll stay here for 10 days and go out when the time is up." This was the safest way. The others nodded. They sat at the top of the crystal steps and slowly waited for time to pass. The happiest thing was that there was a bathroom. God knew how long they had been holding it in. However, they were still a little scared. Even going to the bathroom was a private matter, in pairs. No one knew what would happen if they were alone. Just like that, 3 days passed by peacefully. Everyone was already very familiar with this place, and their hearts relaxed. There was really no danger, and the velvet carpet was quite comfortable to sleep on. That night, Gu Shengyin, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly woke up in a daze. There was no night here, and the room was always as bright as day. Gu Shengyin could only confirm that it was night by looking at the time on her watch. She stood up in a daze and wanted to go to the bathroom. Unexpectedly, Qin Ge, who was sleeping in front of her, suddenly turned over, and Gu Shengyin's feet tripped over. Gu Shengyin lost his balance for a moment and fell straight to the ground. She knocked her forehead on the mahogany coffee table in front of her. So painful. Gu Shengyin only felt a severe headache accompanied by dizziness. She could not help but groan. The others were also awakened by the commotion. Qin Ge was the first to wake up. Seeing Gu Xingyin's appearance, he hurriedly helped her up. "I'm sorry, Lang Shi, I didn't expect." Qin Ge was very embarrassed. Gu Xingyin waved her hand. She could only blame her bad luck. She did not notice that her blood stained the mahogany furniture and actually slowly seeped into it. Chapter 1763. Gu Shangyin got herself some clean water to wipe her wound. There was no disinfectant or clean cotton balls. She could only hope that there wouldn't be any stubborn bacteria on this 1,000-year-old mahogany furniture. She felt someone shake her from behind and couldn't help but say, "Qin Ge, don't shake me." Qin Ji's inexplicable voice came out, "I didn't shake you." Gu Xingyin's heart tightened. Then, not only her, but everyone else also felt the shaking. It wasn't people who were shaking, but the ground. What is going on? Is there an earthquake? The white-collar man, Li Chong, said. Gu Xingyin, even if you used your toes to think, you would know that there couldn't be such a thing as an earthquake. The ground shook so much that they could only hold hands and stick close to each other to avoid being separated. In a place they couldn't see, on the first floor. The malicious spirits that had scared the 6 of them half to death were now cowering in a corner, shivering. The entire hall was filled with the sound of ghosts howling. Those malicious spirits felt that a powerful force was slowly awakening. That power. These ghosts felt that the owner of that power could easily kill them with just a thought. A few of the more powerful ones, led by the female statue ghost, who even had a trace of consciousness, were gathered together to discuss in a low voice. This power. Could it be the legendary Duke? The old woman holding the crowbar said slowly. After she said this, a look of fear appeared on the pale faces of the ghosts. They all disappeared into the darkness. Hopefully, this wasn't true? Second floor. The old woman was already kneeling on the ground, kowtowing in the direction of the stairs at the end of the corridor. She had actually lost a lot of her memories, but she had an instinctive respect and fear for this power. The only ones who were calm were the 6 people who didn't know anything. The sound of the ground shaking slowly stopped. Everything returned to normal. Qin Qingqing heaved a sigh of relief and raised her head. It finally stopped. I was worried that if this place collapsed and we fell down to the first floor. Her voice was stuck in her throat. Not only her, but everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. The earthquake just now seemed to have turned on some unknown switch. The entire room had undergone a huge change. The room that was originally surrounded by walls had a window. They could see the clear sky and white soft clouds outside. If they remembered correctly, the sky of this ancient castle had always been gray. They couldn't even see the sun. Where did the blue sky and white clouds come from? What was most inconceivable was that on the wall opposite them, several doors appeared. Doors. There was a handle made of golden copper on them. They didn't doubt that they could open the door with a slight twist. Then they saw something brand new. This? Qin Qingqing swallowed her saliva. What kind of place have we come to? No one answered her. No one could answer this question. Even Gu Xingyin didn't know. At this moment, everyone was shocked to find that the door suddenly turned. That door moved on its own without anyone else moving. There was only one explanation: there was someone on the other side of the door. Everyone held their breaths. Chapter 1764. Gu Shengyin noticed that someone had grabbed her sleeve. She didn't turn around to see who it was, because she was also nervous. The door opened quietly. A pair of black boots appeared in front of everyone. They looked up. Her long and slender legs were wrapped in tight dark-colored trousers. Above her knees, there was a purple shirt quietly hanging down. Looking up, there was a set of clothes with a very strange design. Looking up, there was a set of clothes with a very strange design. Looking up. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't because this pale-faced man had a handsome face that seemed to gather the spirit energy of heaven and earth. But, Everyone couldn't help but turn to look at the oil painting on the wall. This person looked exactly the same as the person in the oil painting. Did a 1,000-year-old ghost come back to life? The man's gaze swept across everyone, and then accurately stopped on Gu Shengyin. Then, he slowly smiled. Qin Qingqing only felt her body heat up, and then something flowed down her nose. She subconsciously reached out to touch it. Blood. She actually had a nosebleed from looking at a man's smile. Qin Qingqing felt that she was quite useless, but this man was really beautiful. Then, Qin Qingqing only felt her eyes blur, and that extremely impactful handsome face appeared in front of her. How much of an impact would such an enlarged extreme beauty have on a person who was obsessed with looks? Qin Qingqing couldn't answer. Because she felt that she was having difficulty breathing, and the nosebleed seemed to be faster. However, this beauty didn't look at her. Everyone stared blankly as this strangely handsome man blinked his eyes and appeared beside them as if he had teleported, and then he half knelt in front of Lang Shi, and a dreamy gentle smile appeared on his face. I finally waited for you, my bride. Everyone, what kind of strange development was this? They all looked at Gu Shengyin strangely. However, Gu Shengyin couldn't answer them. Because she herself was also dumbfounded. She tried to call the system. System, can you explain? Actually, the moment the man appeared, she sensed a familiar soul aura from him. She knew that this man was her lover, but she couldn't understand what kind of script this was. Bride. Who would call someone a bride the moment they met? What if she didn't come? Would he still call someone else his bride? The system did not answer her. Then, the mysterious man tilted his head and suddenly asked in a soft voice, Are you talking to someone? My bride? Gu Shengyin felt a chill in his heart. This was the first time she had met someone who could sense the existence of the system. Although this man looked very mysterious, strange, and powerful, it was hard for Gu Shengyin to feel nervous when he was surrounded by the familiar lotus fragrance. She looked at the man calmly. Who are you? I've never seen you, and I'm not your bride. Are you sure you didn't recognize the wrong person? The man's lips curled into a smile. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but follow him. This man was simply too good-looking. Especially when he smiled, whether it was the corners of his lips, his eyes, or the tips of his brows, they all seemed to carry a trace of indescribable charm. People couldn't help but follow and yearn for it. And fall for it. Chapter 10. Oh, today's update isn't scary, right? At the end of the chapter, there was a question asking if the female supporting lead would steal the male lead. This world wouldn't. Ha, Qin Qingqing has also grown a lot. There are no updates in the morning. Everyone, please vote after you've finished reading. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Chapter 1765. The man obviously noticed Gu Shengyin's gaze. She was fascinated by him. Accepting this knowledge, the man's smile became even more joyful. He reached out his fair and slender fingers and gently touched the scar on Gu Shengyin's left forehead. Gu Shengyin could feel the slight coolness of his fingers. It didn't hurt when he touched the wound. Instead, it was very comfortable. She couldn't see it, but the others could clearly see that after the mysterious man put his fingers on Lang Shi's wound and gently rubbed it twice, the wound that was originally bruised and swollen had miraculously disappeared. The man was very tall. Even if he was half kneeling, he still looked taller than the others. He bent down and stared at Gu Shengyin. How can I mistake my bride? From the beginning to the end, there will be no one but you. The others sitting by the side, they felt that they were a little redundant standing here. Gu Shengyin tilted her head and avoided his fingers. It wasn't because she didn't like it, but because she felt the cold touch on her forehead itchy. However, the man's eyes darkened because of her avoidance. She seemed to be rejecting him. Gu Shengyin stared at him seriously and asked, I still don't know who you are. The man glanced at her and then glanced at the others sitting on the ground. He said in a low voice, Get up and tidy up, my bride. You're in such a sorry state now. Gu Shengyin was embarrassed when she heard this. Lang Shi and the others came from the city to this castle. After a day and night of escaping in a sorry state, they obviously didn't look very good at the moment. If people were in a situation where they had to worry about their own safety at all times, they naturally wouldn't think more. But now, it was obvious that they were out of danger. Hearing the man's words, Gu Shengyin also felt a little uncomfortable with the sticky feeling on her body. She asked bluntly, "Do you have a bathroom and a change of clothes here? I want to take a shower." The others couldn't help but sweat for her when they heard her words. This mysterious man who suddenly appeared was obviously very powerful. They didn't even know who he was. How dare Lang Shi order him around so confidently? What if she annoyed him? However, no one could understand Gu Shengyin's confidence. She knew that what they were worried about wouldn't happen. Sure enough, hearing Gu Shengyin's words, the man's expression obviously became happy. Of course. This castle has always been prepared for its mistress. He stood up first, then bent down and reached out his hand to Gu Shengyin. Gu hesitated for a moment. She wondered if she needed to be more reserved. Then, she raised her head and met the man's mysterious eyes that were as dark as violets. He had been waiting for her hand. Gu Shengyin blinked. Without much hesitation, he succumbed to her beauty. They were an old couple. To hell with being reserved. Under everyone's gaze, the mysterious man personally held Gu Shengyin's hand and walked into the room on the far left. Looking at the two of them leaving hand in hand, Qin Qingqing clutched her chest and said faintly, "I feel like I'm a little redundant." The others also nodded in agreement. Chapter 1766. To be honest, looking at the way the two of them interacted, it was impossible to tell that they had just met for the first time. Zhong Chao frowned worriedly. "Are we just going to let Lang Shi leave? Will anything happen to her?" Shui Wan rolled her eyes at him and said, "What are you men's eyes for? Didn't you see the way that handsome guy looked at Lang Shi? It was so gentle that he wanted to give the whole world to her. Would such a person hurt Lang Shi? Besides," Shui Wan complained, "even if he really wants to harm Lang Shi, if it's someone Lang Shi can't handle, do you think it'll be of any use even if we follow?" Zhang Chao. He was speechless. In the room, Gu Shengyin followed the man in and realized that it was a huge bedroom. The room was also covered with a thick purple velvet carpet, and even the curtains were purple. Looking at the man's dark purple robe, Gu Shengyin had a certain understanding of the man's preferences. She slowly looked around the bedroom. As someone who had once owned a castle, she had a good eye and could tell that the style of this bedroom was extremely luxurious. Fortunately, the owner of the bedroom had good taste. Although it was luxurious, it didn't feel tacky at all. However, no matter how she looked at it, it didn't look like an ownerless bedroom. She raised her head and voiced her doubts. "From what I see, this bedroom doesn't look like a guest room." "Guest room?" the man asked. He smiled and shook his head. "How can my bride go to the guest room?" "This is my master bedroom, of course." He smiled teasingly. "This is also your master bedroom." Gu Shengyin was calm in the face of such blatant flirting. After knowing the location of the bathroom and confirming that she could use it, she mercilessly kicked him out. "I'm going to take a shower now. Get out." She didn't hesitate to ask him to leave. Since he said that this was her master bedroom, she could use her rights as the mistress. The man wasn't angry at all. He walked out of the bedroom cooperatively and closed the door for Gu Shengyin considerately. Gu Shengyin watched him walk out before she turned around and smiled. Outside the door. After he stepped out of the door, the man's expression changed instantly. In front of outsiders, he restrained his affectionate gentleness, and his expression carried a trace of indifference. "Dear guests who have come from afar, that is the guest room of the castle. There is a change of clothes inside. You can go and freshen up." As he spoke, he pointed in a certain direction. Then, following his movements, the entire wall on the other side suddenly extended out, and a magnificent corridor appeared in front of everyone. On both sides of the corridor were identical rooms. In everyone's eyes, this scene was completely like an audit. However, after experiencing what had happened on the first 2 floors, everyone was traumatized by the existence of the corridor. The 5 of them looked at each other, but no one dared to take a step forward. The man tilted his head and looked at them in confusion. He suddenly looked at Chingu, who was closest to him. Chingu felt his mind go blank. In just a moment, he felt as if everything in his mind had been seen by someone. Chapter 1767. It was at this moment that the man understood why they didn't move. He frowned slightly. If anyone who knew him was here, they would know that the Violet Duke never showed his emotions on his face. Frowning like this was already a sign of extreme anger. He was indeed angry, but not because of these people, but because of the foul atmosphere downstairs. He had only slept for a short 1,000 years, and these cats and dogs dared to come to his place and behave atrociously? What he couldn't stand most was not that they were behaving atrociously here, but because they had frightened Gu Shengyin. He was going to deal with them directly, but then an idea formed in his mind. Chingu was looking at him in horror. He could feel that in that moment, everything in his mind had been seen by the man in front of him. This was simply too terrifying. What kind of existence was he? Of course, the man couldn't answer him. He just said, "You don't have to be afraid here. In this world, no one can hurt my guests." He didn't say it loudly, but the confidence in his words was very strong. Everyone looked at each other. In the end, Qin Qingqing was the first to stand up and thank him. Then she pulled Shui Wan into the first room closest to the hall. The other 3 men looked at each other and decisively entered the same room. They definitely didn't have the courage to enter a room alone. In the whole living room, only the man was left sitting there quietly. Above his head was the painting of a white horse with a bow. Contrasting with the painting, he actually had the illusion that he had traveled through time. However, he did travel through time. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, and his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in the bedroom. He gently knocked on the bathroom door, and his soft and deep voice directly entered Gu Shengyin's ears. "My beautiful bride, I think you may need my help at this moment." The bathroom was silent for a moment. Then, the door was opened from the inside. Gu Shengyin stood at the door with a towel wrapped around his body. Hot steam seeped out of the bathroom. She looked at the man and didn't ask him how he knew she was thinking about him. She just said, "I didn't take the clothes, and I don't know where the clothes you prepared for me are." The man's eyes fell on her exposed shoulders, and his eyes darkened for a moment. He smiled gently and said, "Come with me." He led Gu Shengyin to a gorgeous wardrobe and pulled it open. In an instant, a pile of clothes appeared in front of Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin could clearly see that the wardrobe was divided into 2 distinct sections from the middle. It was obvious that one section was for men and the other for women. However, their styles were all gorgeous and flamboyant, just like the man in front of her. A beautiful wardrobe had always been a woman's favorite. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The man tilted his head and smiled at her. "This wardrobe has been waiting for its mistress for thousands of years." He reached out and picked out a set of clothes for Gu Shengyin. "I'll go out first. Take your time to change," he said as he tapped Gu Shengyin's forehead. Chapter 1768. Gu Shengyin felt that something suddenly appeared in her mind. She looked at the man in front of her emotionally, as if she didn't expect him to be so considerate. The man reached out his hand to cover her eyes and whispered in her ear, "Don't look at me like that." Gu Shengyin didn't understand, and then she heard the next sentence, "I can't help it." Gu Shengyin. The trace of emotion that had just risen disappeared without a trace. She only felt a soft and cold touch on her forehead. Of course, she knew what it was. Then the hand on her eyes was released, and she couldn't see the man when she looked up again. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but smile and whisper, "Why did you run away after kissing me?" The man sitting in the living room suddenly showed a helpless smile. "You can't wrong me. If I didn't run away, you might not be able to get out tonight." Gu Shengyin found that the man took out a complete set of clothes, and there were even undergarments inside. After exclaiming his thoughtfulness again, she slowly picked up the clothes and put them on one by one. "That's right." The man just touched her eyebrows to tell her how to put on these clothes. After finally putting them on, Gu Shengyin looked at herself in the huge carved dressing mirror in the bedroom. At a glance, she understood the man's trick: the style, the color, and the material. It was exactly the same as the man's. It was really. Gu Shengyin held her forehead and laughed first. Such a strong and arrogant lover. It's really very tempting. She gently pushed the door open and walked out. The man sitting in the living room immediately looked at her. Seeing him looking at her without blinking, Gu Shengyin walked to him and turned around. "What's wrong? Don't I look good?" The next moment, her waist was held by a pair of strong arms, and she fell into the arms full of cold fragrance. The man gently buried his head in her fair and beautiful neck. He took a deep breath and murmured, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. No, it's very beautiful. So beautiful that I regret it." Gu Shengyin was a little confused. Regret. She wanted to raise her head, but the man used force on the male lead. "Yes, regret. Such a beautiful of course, should only be seen by me alone." His soft and gentle voice was like the prelude played by the most elegant cello. It could easily make people sink into it. Gu Shengyin allowed herself to sink into it. When the other 5 people finished washing up and walked out of the room, the first thing they saw was this: the slender man and woman were hugging each other like a pair of tangled mandarin ducks. Qin Qingqing whispered, "Did we appear at the wrong time?" When she said this, she felt a little depressed. She recognized that the man was that mysterious and powerful handsome man, but she had never seen the woman before. This beauty was clearly calling Lang Shi his bride earlier, but it had only been a short while, and he was already hugging another woman. Sure enough, men were creatures that could not be trusted at all. At this moment, Qin Qingqing had completely forgotten that there was no other woman in this castle. Then, she saw the man and woman separate and look over. Qin Qingqing. That was actually Lang Shi. Gao Langji thought that she would sleep, but she underestimated her diligence. It was 4 in the morning, and 6 in the morning tomorrow. Those who felt that she was very diligent could vote for her and leave comments on her face. Good night. Chapter 1769. Not only Qin Qingqing, but everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Gu Shengyin, who was standing beside the man in purple. After being together for so long, they all knew that Lang Shi was very beautiful. She was not the kind of beauty that would make you think that this woman was not bad looking at first glance. Instead, she was the kind of beauty that would make you fall into a daze and be infinitely surprised that you could actually see such a beautiful person in real life other than on the big screen. However, even though they all admitted that Lang Shi was a beauty, at this moment, when they saw Lang Shi standing there elegantly in a classical Western palace dress, they were still shocked. She was actually so beautiful. Moreover, she clearly had the facial features of an Asian, but when she wore this dress, it actually looked so harmonious on her. The dark purple dress was fitted neatly on Gu Shengyin's body. The size was so perfect that it was as if it was specially made for her. The sleeves and edges of the dress were outlined with exquisite patterns with golden threads. The hemline of the dress poured down like flowing water on the ground, charming and enchanting. Qin Qingqing covered her mouth with her hand. Such a dress was probably every woman's lifelong dream, right? The man standing beside Gu Shengyin was a little displeased. He frowned as he looked at those people who were dazed by Gu Shengyin's beauty, and his eyes darkened for a moment. He did not like these people looking at his bride with such eyes. He wanted to hide her. It was best for such beauty to only be seen by himself. The man held Gu Shengyin's arm possessively and looked at the others. "I already know the ins and outs of everyone here. Do you need me to send you out now?" He did not reject these people, but he did not like them very much either. Since they came with Shesha, he would send them out properly. Out. When everyone heard these two words, their hearts were filled with endless excitement. When they came with the mentality of adventure and curiosity. But after coming, they only had one goal left in their hearts: to get out alive. And now, there was someone who casually said that he could send them out. Of course they were willing. Everyone's eyes lit up almost instantly. They looked at the man as if he was a god. The man probably already knew their answer. He nodded. Then I'll send you out. Wait. Qin Qingqing suddenly mustered up the courage to speak. She looked at this extremely handsome man and suddenly pointed at Gu Shengyin. Sister Lang Shi, aren't you coming with us? When everyone heard her words, they realized that Gu Shengyin wasn't included in the everyone the man mentioned. If it was before they came here, perhaps they would be overjoyed that they could be saved and would not care about others at all. But now, things were different. In their hearts, if it weren't for Gu Shengyin, they wouldn't have made it here alive. Not to mention, there was still a chance to leave this place alive. Therefore, they could not abandon Gu Shengyin and go out alone at this time. Zhang Chao said, "The 6 of us came together. Of course, we will leave together." The others nodded as well. Gu Shengyin's heart warmed when she saw this. It was a great feeling to see his kindness being reciprocated in kind. She glanced at the man and suddenly said with a smile, "You can leave first. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine here." Chapter 1770. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, everyone looked like they wanted to say something. They didn't expect that the man didn't say anything, but Lang Shi did. Looking at the long dress she was wearing, which was obviously the same as the mysterious man's, everyone felt like they were being lovey-dovey. At the same time, they were also guessing in their hearts. Could it be that this man was right? Lang Shi was his destined bride? For someone like Qin Qingqing, who had a rich imagination, she had already imagined an unparalleled love from her previous life. The man's eyelids trembled. He didn't say anything and waved his hand. Before anyone could react, they found that their line of sight had shifted. When they came back to their senses, they found themselves outside the castle. Their backpacks and food were on the ground beside them. Qin Qingqing stared at herself in a daze, then looked at the people around her. She then looked at the ghost castle in the distance, which was still shrouded in dark clouds. She pinched herself hard, still in disbelief. I'm out? The pain from her body told her that this wasn't a dream. Qin Ge, who was standing beside her, couldn't help but smile. That's right, we're really out. Ah! Qin Qingqing suddenly screamed in excitement, and then threw herself onto Qin Ji's body. She hugged him and shouted, "We're out. We're out of that damned place alive. I'm still alive." Qin Ge felt a little uncomfortable when his body was hugged. However, he quickly relaxed and gave Qin Qingqing a hug as well. That's right. We're out alive. At a time like this, what could make people happier than a hug from their companions? They stood there excitedly for a while, then looked worriedly at the castle. Lang Shi was still inside. Zhang Chao thought for a while and said, "Since Lang Shi said that there wouldn't be any problems, it means that she's confident." Shui Wan nodded. She said, "I think we don't have to worry about Shui Wan. That mysterious man in purple is obviously infatuated with her to the bone. He won't hurt her." Everyone thought so and felt that it should be so. After completely relaxing, Qin Qingqing suddenly thought of a problem. She said with a bitter expression, "We told the driver that we would pick him up in 10 days, but it's only been 2 days." Hearing this, everyone turned around to take a look. There was a vast expanse of yellow sand, and not a single person could be seen. So the question was, how were they going to return? Everyone. Zhang Chao slowly put his backpack on his shoulder and said with a smile, "This adventure has unexpectedly ended prematurely. It seems that we can only have a healthy walk." The others also laughed. They had just escaped from such a place, so for them, anything that they encountered now was basically nothing. One by one, they picked up their bags and walked in the opposite direction of the castle. At this moment, Zhang Chao suddenly turned around to take a look. What he saw shocked him. Look! Everyone turned around and saw a scene that shocked them. In the distance, the ghost castle, which was shrouded in black clouds, seemed to have been destroyed by some great power. Starting from the bottom, it started to crumble inch by inch. First 2 chapters, today's 6th chapter. The remaining 4 chapters might have to be released at night. Gao Lengji's relatives seemed to be coming to visit. She lay half dead on the stove and cried for an entire day. It's the end of the month, and it's a new week. Don't stock up on goods. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.